This seat isn't yours. Gather your things, right now." Carol Briggs didn't lower her voice. She didn't check her notes. She didn't glance at the boarding pass still resting on the armrest beside the boy's hand. She simply stood in the center of the first-class aisle of Apex Atlantic Flight 112, arms folded across her navy blazer, chin slightly raised, and looked down at a 14-year-old boy sitting quietly with a hardcover book open on his lap, as though the verdict had been reached long before the trial began. She didn't look at his ticket. She looked at his face. And in that single moment, before a single word of explanation had been offered or refused, everything that followed was set into motion. What Carol Briggs did not know, what she could not have imagined as she stood there in her pressed uniform with 24 years of seniority pinned to her chest, was that in exactly 22 minutes, a single phone call from that boy's father would freeze $1.2 billion in corporate financing, end her career, permanently collapse a mid-sized logistics company, and put the name Apex Atlantic Airways on the front page of every major financial publication in the world. Not for a reason anyone in that cabin would have been proud of. But that was 22 minutes away. Right now it was 9:41 in the morning at John F. Kennedy International Airport Terminal 4, and Flight 112 to London Heathrow was scheduled to push back at 10:15. The first-class cabin of Apex Atlantic Flight 112 existed in a different register of reality than the rest of the aircraft. The air was cooler here, filtered and faintly scented with something between warm cedar and expensive leather. The lighting ran along the ceiling in soft amber strips that never quite became glare. Each suite was its own enclosed world. A wide flat seat wrapped in cream-colored upholstery, a personal divider that could be raised for privacy, a small reading lamp, a built-in screen, and a menu card printed on cardstock thick enough to use as a cutting board. The carpet was a deep charcoal gray. The overhead storage was lined with brushed aluminum panels. A row of crystal glasses sat perfectly arranged in the forward galley, catching the morning light that came through the oval windows on the left side of the aircraft. This was a cabin designed to insulate people from friction, from noise, from the ordinary human chaos of air travel. It was a space built for a specific kind of person, or rather for a specific idea of what that person looked like. 14-year-old Marcus Ellison did not match that idea. Not according to Carol Briggs. Marcus was sitting in seat 2A, window seat, second row. He wore a dark navy hoodie with no logo, clean khaki pants, and white sneakers that were scuffed on the left toe from a week of walking around his school campus. His backpack, dark, simple, no visible brand, was stored in the overhead compartment above him. On his lap sat a thick hardcover copy of Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. A black bookmark with a small golden star on the end, a gift from his father, was tucked 3/4 of the way through. He had been watching the ground crew through the oval window. One of the technicians below was walking the length of the left wing with a flashlight checking panels. Marcus had been watching him methodically for about 4 minutes, turning the process over in his mind the way he turned over most things, quietly from multiple angles without urgency. Marcus traveled alone often enough that it no longer made him nervous. His father, Noah Ellison, had been in London since the previous Wednesday arranging the final structure of a corporate merger that had been 18 months in the making. Marcus had finished his spring semester exams 2 days ahead of schedule, a fact that surprised exactly no one who knew him, and Noah had arranged for him to fly out and spend the long weekend together before the new term began. No assistant had accompanied him to the gate. Marcus hadn't wanted one. He had checked in, himself, walked himself through security, bought himself a bottle of water and a protein bar from a kiosk near the gate, and presented himself to the private concierge service his father used for exactly this purpose, ensuring that unaccompanied minor protocols were followed, that the crew was notified, and that the seat assignment was locked. The gate agent, a woman named Patricia with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, had walked Marcus personally to seat 2A. She had smiled, told him to have a wonderful flight, and confirmed that the crew had his file. That had been 20 minutes ago. Since then, Marcus had read 40 pages of his book, finished his water, and observed the wing technician finish his inspection and disappear beneath the aircraft. He had also noted, without particular concern, that the man who had settled into seat 2B, the aisle seat beside him, had not said hello, had kicked his carry-on into the footwell without looking, and had been speaking loudly into a phone since before he sat down. The man's name was Raymond Holt. Marcus didn't know that yet. He would. Raymond Holt moved through the world the way a pressure system moves. You felt his presence before you fully registered it. He was broad-shouldered and red-faced, the kind of man whose shirt collar looked slightly too tight regardless of its actual size. His suit was charcoal custom-fitted and had been expensive at some point, though it had spent enough time being sat in and sweated through that it now carried a particular quality of rumpled authority. He was 49 years old and had the posture of a man who had spent 2 decades treating his own impatience as a competitive advantage. He marched down the first-class aisle with his phone pressed between his ear and his shoulder, a wheeled carry-on following behind him, and his wife Sandra 2 steps back. Sandra Holt was quieter, smaller, and had the practiced expression of someone who had learned to exist within her husband's velocity without being swept away by it. Raymond's boarding pass read Row 2 Seat B, the aisle seat. He found it, saw the boy in 2A assess the situation in under a second, and sat down without a word. His carry-on went into the overhead bin directly above the seat. It was a tight fit. He forced it closed without checking whether anything was already up there. Marcus watched this without comment. Raymond's phone conversation continued without pause. Numbers, wire transfers, a man named Bergson who apparently needed to be reminded of a deadline more than once. Raymond's voice filled the space between the suites like something that had not been invited in. Then he turned. Not to Marcus. Past Marcus toward the forward galley where Carol Briggs had just emerged from the crew area smoothing the front of her blazer. He raised 2 fingers at her the way someone flags a taxi. "Get my wife up here." Sandra was standing in the aisle behind him holding her own boarding pass. Her seat was in economy, a booking issue that Raymond had apparently been furious about since check-in. He had already complained to 2 gate agents and accomplished nothing. Carol Briggs materialized at his elbow with the speed of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of request. She was 52 years old, 24 years with Apex Atlantic senior purser on transatlantic routes. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to sharpen her features. Her uniform was immaculate. Her smile when she deployed it toward Raymond was wide and practiced and warm. "Mr. Holt," she said because she had checked the manifest and knew the name before he gave it. "We'll see what we can do. Please make yourself comfortable." Her eyes moved around the cabin. Most seats were occupied by familiar categories of first-class passenger. A tech executive in 1A who had his laptop open before the doors were even armed, a silver-haired British businessman in 1B reading the Financial Times, a woman in 3A who had the quiet authority of someone in entertainment. None of them were obvious candidates for relocation. Then her gaze landed on seat 2A, a teenager, 14, maybe 15, dark hoodie, no visible premium luggage, sitting alone. The calculation took less than 2 seconds. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't even conscious, not entirely. It was simply the accumulated result of 24 years of a world view that had never been corrected. She moved toward him. From seat 4, a man named Tyler Moss looked up from his laptop. He was 31 years old, a freelance journalist who covered business and culture, and he had the particular professional habit of noticing when something was wrong before he could fully articulate why. He watched Carol Briggs cross the cabin toward the boy in 2A. He watched her expression, the way the wide smile collapsed into something narrower and more efficient the moment she turned away from Raymond Holt. He didn't reach for his phone yet. He just watched. From seat 5B, Sophie Grant lowered her own phone. She had been editing photos from a layover in Miami and followed the direction of Tyler's gaze. Sophie was 26, a travel blogger with 340,000 followers on TikTok and the instinct of someone who had built a career on recognizing a story the moment it began to take shape. She watched Carol reach the boys' row and stop. She pulled one earbud out. From seat 1B, James Whitfield set the corner of his Financial Times down 1 inch and looked over it. Whitfield was 67 British and had spent 40 years in international finance. He had an old man's patience and a particular intolerance for certain kinds of behavior that he had spent enough of his life watching go unchallenged. He watched Carol Briggs stand over the boy. He did not look away. Marcus Ellison had his bookmark in his hand. He had taken it out of the page and was holding it loosely between 2 fingers when Carol Briggs stopped beside his row and said the words that would echo through the next 3 weeks of his life. "Excuse me, I need to see your boarding pass." Her tone was the kind of professional that had been polished so long it had become a different thing entirely, not warmth but the precise simulation of neutrality. The voice of someone who had learned to say difficult things in a way that made them sound like weather. Marcus looked up. He placed the bookmark back in his page. He closed the book, carefully the spine not cracked, and set it on the small tray beside him. Then he reached into the travel wallet tucked into the seat pocket in front of him and removed his boarding pass. He extended it toward her with both hands. "Here you go, ma'am." Carol took it. She looked at it. The card read Ellison Marcus, Seat 2, A full fare first class, Apex Atlantic Flight 112, JFK to London Heathrow. There was no standby code, no employee pass designation, no asterisk, no flag, no qualifier of any kind. It was a full-price, fully confirmed first-class ticket in every way that a boarding pass could communicate such a thing. Carol Briggs looked at it for a moment that was just slightly too long. Then she handed it back with a small, efficient flick of her wrist. "There's been a system error with this assignment," she said. Her voice had not changed. It carried no apology. "We had an equipment change overnight. Your seat has been reassigned." Marcus did not respond immediately. He took the boarding pass back. He looked at it. Then he looked at Carol. When he spoke, his voice was even. Not defiant, not frightened, just clear. "Ma'am, the gate agent walked me to this seat herself." She confirmed it. Raymond Holt shifted in the seat beside him. He exhaled. Loud, theatrical, the sound of a man for whom other people's complications are a personal offense. "Kid, they said there's been a change." "It happens. Grab your stuff." Marcus did not look at Raymond. He kept his eyes on Carol. "Is there documentation of the equipment change?" he asked. A small pause. Carol had not expected that question. Not from a teenager. Not delivered in that register. Calm and specific, like someone reading from a checklist they had memorized without effort. "We don't need to provide documentation," Carol said, and now there was something slightly tighter beneath the professional surface. "I'm the senior crew member on this aircraft, and I'm asking you to—" "I'm an unaccompanied minor," Marcus said. Still even, still unhurried. Under airline protocol, any seat change for an unaccompanied minor has to be coordinated with the ground concierge. Has that coordination happened? From seat 4A, Tyler Moss had opened the camera on his phone. He held it in his lap, lens facing forward, and pressed record. Carol Briggs had been flying for 24 years. In that time, she had developed a precise and well-maintained sense of her own authority. It was not cruelty that drove her. It was something more insidious and more durable certainty. She was certain in a way that had never been genuinely challenged that she knew who belonged in her cabin and who had arrived there by mistake. She had moved passengers 6 times in her career, always with a smooth professional explanation, always with the language of policy and procedure. Equipment changes, overbooking protocols, seating anomalies. The language of bureaucracy was her preferred weapon because it was so difficult to argue with. It didn't sound like bias. It sounded like process. Not one of those 6 passengers had been a white man in a tailored suit. She recognized on some level that she would never have examined in daylight that the boy in 2A was not what she expected to see there. The hoodie, the age, the aloneness. She had already decided before she touched his boarding pass that his presence in that seat was a kind of error, an administrative accident that needed correcting before it inconvenienced someone who deserved to be there. The fact that his ticket was valid was an obstacle, not a revelation. She had dealt with obstacles before. She turned slightly and made eye contact with Patrick Lowe, the second cabin attendant working the first-class section. Patrick was 41, had been with the airline for 9 years, and had spent enough time working under Carol to know what that particular look meant. He moved toward them from the forward galley without being summoned aloud. Patrick Carroll said, "Please confirm the seating reassignment for 2A and prepare an alternate seat in the main cabin." Patrick nodded. He did not check a tablet. He did not look at a screen. He simply nodded. It was that nod, that undocumented, unchecked, unverified nod, that Tyler Moss captured on his phone from row 4. Diana Reyes was standing at the entrance to the galley, a beverage cart beside her, when she heard Patrick's instructions. She was 28 years old, the youngest crew member on this flight, and had been with Apex Atlantic for 3 years. She had been filing Carol's sharp looks and loaded silences into a mental folder since the morning briefing. She opened her mouth. Patrick looked at her. One look, the kind that carries an entire hierarchy. She closed her mouth, but her hand resting on the edge of the cart tightened. Raymond Holt put his phone down for the first time since boarding. He turned fully toward Marcus, the way he turned toward junior associates when a meeting had already gone longer than he was willing to tolerate. "Listen," he said. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but these people have jobs to do. My wife needs a seat. You're in it. The crew's telling you to move. So move." Marcus turned and looked at Raymond Holt for exactly 1 second. It was not a long look. It was the kind of look that contains a complete assessment, calm, clear, and utterly without performance. Then Marcus turned back to Carol. "I'd like to speak to the captain," Marcus said. Raymond made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. Somewhere between the two. "You want to speak to the captain." He said it slowly, as if the sentence were absurd enough that repeating it might make the boy hear himself. "You're a kid. You're sitting in a $14,000 seat that you clearly don't." He stopped, not because anyone interrupted him, because James Whitfield in seat 1B had folded the Financial Times slowly and deliberately onto his knee and was now looking at Raymond with the mild, steady attention of someone who has all the time in the world and intends to use it. "Finish the sentence," Whitfield said quietly. "Please. Go on." Raymond did not finish the sentence. The cabin had gone very still, not silent. The white noise of the ventilation system continued. The distant voices from economy drifted forward, but the kind of still where people have stopped pretending to be occupied with other things. Carol took this moment to lean forward, lowering her voice so that it didn't carry past the first 2 rows. Or so she believed. "Young man," she said, "if you continue to refuse a direct instruction from a crew member that constitutes a violation of federal aviation regulations, I will have no choice but to contact Port Authority Security and have you removed from this aircraft. You will miss your flight, and you will wait alone in this terminal until someone comes to collect you. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Marcus looked at her. The cabin waited. He was 14 years old. JFK International Airport was massive and loud and indifferent, and his father was 3,000 miles away, and the woman standing over him had just described, in calm, clipped professional language, leaving him alone in one of the busiest airports in the world. The fear moved through him. He felt it. He didn't pretend otherwise, not to himself. His pulse lifted. His hands wanted to shake, but his face didn't change. His father had taught him that. Not as a lesson with words and a whiteboard, as a thing demonstrated over and over in hotel lobbies and conference rooms and airline check-in lines across a childhood that had provided plenty of opportunities for instruction. Whatever they take from you in that moment, don't give them your face. Marcus looked at Carol Briggs. "Okay," he said, and he reached for his phone. From seat 5B, Sophie Grant was already opening TikTok. Her live stream loaded in 4 seconds. She didn't say anything to the camera at first. She just held it steady and let it see what she was seeing. The caption she typed with her thumb one-handed without looking down. "Watch what's happening on Apex Atlantic right now. JFK to London, first class. 50 viewers within the first minute, then 120. From seat 4, Tyler Moss had already uploaded his first clip to Twitter. 12 seconds of Carol approaching Marcus, taking the boarding pass and handing it back without running a single check. His caption read, "Flight attendant removes black teenager from first-class seat he paid for. Flight 112, JFK to Heathrow. Happening right now." From seat 1B, James Whitfield had set the Financial Times aside completely. He straightened his jacket, rose from his seat, and walked toward the forward galley with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who had somewhere important to be and had decided to go there now. And in the galley, Diana Reyes watched him come. She uncurled her fingers from the edge of the beverage cart. She took one step forward. James Whitfield reached the forward galley at the same time Carol Briggs was turning away from Marcus's row to speak quietly to Patrick. Whitfield stopped in the narrow space between the galley counter and the first row of seats. He was not a large man, medium height, silver-haired, the kind of lean that comes from decades of discipline rather than youth, but he occupied space in the way that people who have never needed to raise their voice tend to occupy it. Completely. "Excuse me," he said to Carol clearly. "I'd like the name of your supervisor and this flight number logged for a formal complaint." Carol turned. The professional smile materialized. The wide version. The one she kept for people whose inconvenience might cost the airline something. "Of course, sir. Is there something I can help you with?" "You can help with what I asked for," Whitfield said. "The supervisor's name and confirmation that this complaint will be logged." "Absolutely. And may I ask what the complaint concerns?" "That boy's ticket was valid," Whitfield said. "I watched you take it and return it without running a single verification. There was no equipment change. There was a man in seat 2B who wanted his wife moved up and you relocated a 14-year-old child to accommodate him." Carol's smile held, but something behind it didn't. A small structural thing. The way a wall looks exactly the same right up until the moment the first crack appears. "Sir, there are standard seating protocols that—" "I'd like to see them," Whitfield said. "The written protocols. Specifically the section that describes the procedure for reassigning an unaccompanied minor's seat without coordinating with the ground concierge." Patrick Lowe appeared at Carol's side. He was good at appearing, smoothly, quietly at the exact moment Carol needed reinforcement. He addressed Whitfield with a practiced evenness. "Sir, if you'd be comfortable returning to your seat, we'd be happy to address any concerns after the aircraft doors are closed and we're underway. Take your hand off my arm," Whitfield said. Patrick had moved to place a guiding hand at Whitfield's elbow. He withdrew it instantly. "I haven't raised my voice?" Whitfield continued, looking at Carol. "I haven't caused a disruption. I've asked a reasonable question that a senior crew member should be able to answer without difficulty. If you can't answer it, that itself is information I intend to report." From 5B. Sophie Grant had her phone tilted at what appeared to be a resting angle. The live stream was capturing the exchange. Her viewer count had climbed to 2,400. Comments were rolling up the screen faster than they could be read. She kept her voice low, almost a murmur, narrating into the phone with the casual tone of someone describing what they're having for lunch. "Okay, so now an older gentleman. He's been in 1B this whole time, didn't say anything at first. He's gone up to talk to the flight attendant, and they're not happy about it. Watch." Carol excused herself from Whitfield with a practiced pivot, not rude, not conciliatory, simply a redirect that closed the conversation without technically ending it. She promised a supervisor would be in touch. She thanked him for his patience. She moved away before he could ask a follow-up question. Back at Marcus's row, Patrick had already retrieved a smaller carry-on tag and was indicating, wordlessly with a gesture, that the aisle was clear and Marcus should gather his things. Marcus had his phone in his hand. He had not made a call yet. He was looking at the screen. Carol returned. Her voice had lost approximately 10% of its practiced warmth. Not enough that a casual observer would notice. Enough that Marcus noticed. "If you'll come with me," she said, "Patrick will help you get settled into a seat in the main cabin. We appreciate your cooperation." "I want to speak to the captain," Marcus said again. Same tone, same volume. It was not a performance of stubbornness. It was a fact being restated. "The captain is occupied with pre-departure checks and is not available for passenger requests at this time. Then I'd like to wait until he is." Raymond Holt, who had spent the last 4 minutes tapping at his phone with mounting irritation, set it down again. He leaned across the armrest that separated him from Marcus's seat. Not touching him, but close. "What exactly do you think is going to happen here?" he said. "You're going to sit there until the captain comes out. They'll call the cops. You'll be dragged off. Is that what you want?" Marcus looked at him. "I want to sit in the seat I paid for." "Well, that's not how this works." "Why not?" The question was simple. It landed in the cabin the way a small stone lands in still water. The surface closed over it almost immediately, but the ripples spread. Raymond blinked. He had not been asked why not in a meeting or a negotiation or a personal confrontation in so long that the question seemed to temporarily disassemble his response mechanisms. His mouth moved. Then he looked at Carol as if she might provide the answer. Carol did not provide the answer. She had moved to the intercom panel. "Patrick?" She said into the handset, her voice now low and deliberate. "Please prepare seat 42, E in the main cabin, and inform the rear crew that we have a minor being relocated." "She's not even trying to hide it anymore," Sophie murmured to her phone. "She just announced it on the intercom, like he's a package being rerouted. Viewer count 4,100. Diana Reyes had not moved back to her cart. She was still standing at the edge of the galley entrance, and when Carol turned with the handset, their eyes met. Diana took a step into the cabin. "Carol," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear in the way that things are clear when someone has decided they are finished being quiet. "I checked his boarding pass when he came on board. It's full fare. It's clean. There's no equipment change logged in the system today. I checked before we started boarding. The cabin had gone still again. A different kind of still this time. The kind where people have made a decision to witness something." Carol looked at Diana the way a senior officer looks at a junior one who has just spoken in a meeting they were not invited to address. "You've overstepped your role," Carol said. "Each word precise." "I've done my job," Diana said. Patrick stepped forward, positioning himself between Diana and the rest of the cabin. "Diana, you need to... The protocol for unaccompanied minors requires ground concierge coordination for any seat change," Diana said, talking over him with a steadiness that surprised even herself. "That coordination didn't happen." "I know, because I'm the one who's supposed to be copied on it, and I wasn't." "That will be addressed through proper channels," Carol said, "which is not here and not now." Then where Diana asked, "Because right now there is a 14-year-old boy being told to move to the back of the plane, and there's no legitimate reason for it. And everyone in this cabin is watching." She said that last part louder, not aggressively, informatively. She was right. Everyone in that cabin was watching. The tech executive in 1A had his laptop open but was no longer looking at the screen. The woman in 3A had her phone in her lap. James Whitfield had returned to his seat but sat forward, elbows on knees, watching with the full, deliberate attention of someone recording events through their eyes. Sophie's viewer count 6,800. Tyler Moss had uploaded a second clip. 17 seconds. Carol at the intercom. Patrick moving toward Diana. The caption, now the flight attendant who originally spoke up for the kid is being silenced. This is still happening. Raymond Holt stood up. He was not a man who sat through confrontations that were moving in directions he didn't control. He stepped into the aisle, adjusted his jacket, and addressed the cabin with the broad, commanding voice of someone accustomed to chairing meetings. Look, I travel 200 days a year. I know how these things work. The crew makes a call, you follow it. That's how aviation works. If there's an issue, you file a complaint after you land. He paused, scanning the faces around him. Some people belong in first class, and some people take a little longer to get their paperwork in order, and that's not... He stopped. The cabin was silent. Completely. Not because he'd said something powerful, because the sentence had collapsed in his mouth before he could finish it, and in the space where the rest of it should have been, every person within earshot understood exactly what the rest of it would have been. Sophie's phone was tilted directly toward him now. Viewer count 9,300. Raymond looked around. He registered the phones. He registered the faces. And that's not a reflection on anyone, he finished lamely. It's just logistics. No one responded. No one nodded. No one offered him any of the agreement he was accustomed to receiving when he spoke in rooms. Whitfield from 1B said nothing. He simply looked at Raymond with an expression that was worse than anger. It was the expression of a man who has seen something he expected to see and is tired of having been right. That's enough, Carol said, directing the words at no one specifically, which meant at everyone. She moved back toward Marcus's row. Her voice had dropped to something that was meant to feel final. Young man, I need you to come with me now. Marcus looked at his phone. He looked at Carol. He stood up. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He reached above him, opened the overhead bin, and pulled his backpack out. One strap over each shoulder adjusted the fit. He picked up his book. He placed his bookmark carefully in the page. Then he followed Carol down the aisle through the curtain and into the main cabin. He did not look back. He did not need to. He knew what he had to do. Seat 42E was a middle seat. To the left was a large man in a gray polo shirt who had been asleep since before the boarding door opened, his head tilted back and his breathing slow and even. To the right was a young woman with a toddler on her lap. The child was awake and restless, small hands grabbing at everything within reach. The air in row 42 was warmer, thicker, and carried the faint background smell of jet fuel that never quite reached the front of the aircraft. Carol Briggs gestured at the seat. Here you are. Have a pleasant flight. She turned and walked back up the aisle without waiting for a response. Her heels were quiet on the carpet. She disappeared through the curtain into first class. Marcus stood for a moment beside the row. Then he shifted past the young woman's extended legs and lowered himself into 42E. He set his backpack on his knees. He held it there with both arms in front of him, not hugging it, just resting against it. He looked straight ahead at the seat back in front of him where a small screen displayed the pre-flight animation and a safety card was tucked into the pocket. He breathed. Slow. Once. Twice. He was 14 years old. He had not cried in front of Carol Briggs. He had not cried in front of Raymond Holt. He had not given anyone in that first-class cabin the satisfaction of his fear. Here in row 42, with a stranger asleep on one side and a toddler reaching for his hoodie on the other, he allowed himself to feel what had happened. It moved through him like weather. Not a storm, not a breakdown, just a gray, heavy pressure across his chest that he recognized and didn't fight. He had done nothing wrong. He had been polite. He had known the protocol. He had asked the right questions in the right tone, and none of it had mattered because Carol Briggs had looked at him before he opened his mouth and had already decided. He knew that. He had known it while it was happening. The question was, what came next? Before we go any further, if you're watching this from your couch, you're off as a plane of your own. I want to ask you something. Marcus Ellison was 14 years old. He had a valid ticket. He had done everything right. He sat alone in seat 42E with his backpack on his lap and his book in his hand, and the only thing he had done to end up there was walk onto that plane looking exactly like himself. If you were sitting in that cabin today, if you were in 4A or 5B or 1B, and you watched all of it happen, what would you have done? Leave your answer in the comments, because the people who did say something on this flight, they matter to this story. And if you believe that no one, not a child, not an adult, should be treated like a problem to be relocated, hit subscribe, because what happens next is something you need to see. Marcus reached into the front pocket of his backpack and pulled out his phone. He did not open it immediately. He held it in his palm and looked at it. His father had told him something once. Not in a lecture, not at a scheduled moment, but in the middle of a long drive through Connecticut on a Sunday afternoon when the radio was off and the trees were just beginning to turn. Marcus had been 11. People are going to look at you before they hear you. They're going to make decisions about what you're allowed to have and where you're allowed to be before you say a single word. That is a fact, and pretending it isn't will not protect you from it. What will protect you is this. Write it down. Write everything down. Names, times, exactly what was said. Because memory is soft and words on a page are not. Marcus had asked why writing it down mattered. Noah had glanced over at him and then back at the road. Because when you're ready to act, you'll have the record. And the record will do things that anger never can. Marcus opened his phone. He opened the notes application. He typed Flight 112, JFK to London, 9:58 a.m. Senior crew, Carol Briggs. Seat 2B passenger, Raymond Holt. Company mentioned Mercer Logistics Group. Moved from seat 2A to 42E. Reason given equipment change. No documentation provided. No ground concierge coordination. Threat made Port Authority police removal from aircraft. He read it back. He corrected one word. Then he saved it. Then he found the name Dad in his contacts and pressed call. The memories came while the phone was ringing. They always did in moments like this. Not as distractions, but as context. The way his father had built a frame around Marcus's world piece by piece, incident by incident, without dramatizing any of it. The first time Marcus understood what his father had faced, he was 10 years old, and they were at a hotel in Chicago for a conference. Noah had gone to the concierge desk wearing a sweater and dark pants. Not dressed down, not in any way that Marcus could see wrong with, just not in a suit. The man behind the desk had spoken past Noah's shoulder, at first addressing a question to the space beside him before appearing to realize Noah was alone and was in fact the person speaking. The interaction had lasted 4 minutes and ended correctly, but Marcus had felt something watching it. A low-grade wrongness he couldn't name yet. On the elevator going up, Noah had said nothing, but he'd put a hand on Marcus's shoulder for a moment. That was all. The second Marcus was 12. He had found in a drawer of his father's home office a handwritten list. Names, dates, descriptions of incidents, hotels, airports, banks, boardrooms. Some dated to when Noah was in his 20s. Some were recent. The list was not angry. It was not emotional. It was written in the same neat, precise hand Noah used for everything. Marcus had asked about it. Noah had sat down on the edge of the desk. "That list is 23 years old," he said. "I started it when I was your age. Every time someone looked at me and decided before I spoke, I wrote it down. not to remember being hurt, to remember what I was building toward. Every name on that list was a reason for what Noah had looked at him for a long moment, to make sure it couldn't happen again. Not just to me, to you. The third memory was not a story. It was a sentence. Said once at the end of a long evening when Marcus was 13 and had come home from a social event that had left him quiet in a way Noah recognized immediately. Noah had waited until Marcus was ready to talk. When Marcus finally described what had happened, a teacher, a comment, a moment of public belittlement delivered with a smile, Noah had listened all the way through. Then he said, "You didn't cause that. You endured it. Those are two different things, and what you do with it afterward is a third thing, and that one is yours." Marcus had thought about that sentence for 8 months. He was thinking about it now in seat 42E when the call connected. Marcus. His father's voice. Low, immediate, fully present. "You should be in the air." Dad. One word. But Noah Ellison heard everything inside it the way parents hear things that aren't spoken. The careful control in it, the steadiness that was being maintained at some cost. "What happened?" Noah asked. "Are you hurt?" "I'm not hurt," Marcus said quietly, one hand shielding his mouth from the passengers around him. "But they moved me. I'm in the back." "Who moved you?" Marcus gave him the account in order. Carol Briggs. Raymond Holt. Mercer Logistics. Seat 2A. Seat 42E. The boarding pass. The equipment change that wasn't logged. The threat about port authority. He repeated phrases exactly. "You are in violation of federal aviation regulations. I will have you removed." On the other end of the line, in a glass-walled conference room on the 38th floor of a tower in Canary Wharf, Noah Ellison did not make a sound for the entire duration of Marcus's account. He listened the way he listened in board meetings when the numbers were telling him something he needed to understand before he responded to. When Marcus finished, there was a pause of exactly 4 seconds. "Are the doors closed?" Noah asked. "No. The captain said 15 minutes for a cargo delay." "Okay." Noah's voice shifted. Not warmer, but softer in the specific way it softened when it was directed at Marcus and no one else. "Listen to me. Don't cry. Don't speak to anyone else. Stay exactly where you are." What was the flight attendant's full name? Carol Briggs. She had a gold name tag. And the passenger, Raymond Holt. He mentioned Mercer Logistics. He had a business card in his breast pocket. I saw the logo when he leaned over. A brief pause. "Good. I love you. Hang up the phone." The line went dead. Marcus put the phone in his pocket. He opened his book. He placed his bookmark at the page. He looked at the words without reading them. He waited. In the forward galley of Flight 112, Carol Briggs pressed the intercom button and listened to the faint electronic click that meant the channel was open. Her expression was composed. The situation was under control. The boy was in the back. Sandra Holt was now settled in seat 2A. Raymond Holt had stopped blocking the aisle. The disruption was resolved. She was not prepared for what was about to happen. "Attention all crew," she said into the handset. "We have a situation requiring ground security coordination. All crew stand by for further instruction." The announcement came through the overhead speakers in a flat, unhurried voice. In the first-class cabin, it produced the effect of a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples moved outward instantly and didn't stop. The tech executive in 1A closed his laptop. The woman in 3A, who had not previously shown any visible engagement with the situation, took her phone out of her handbag and pointed it toward the forward galley. James Whitfield, who had returned to his seat and picked up the Financial Times purely as a structural exercise in patience, set it down for the second and final time. And in seat 5, B. Sophie Grant stopped murmuring quietly to her phone and said with an audible intake of breath, "She just announced security. Over the intercom. For a 14-year-old kid. Viewer count 11,200. Tyler Moss had uploaded a third clip while Carol was at the intercom. This one was 23 seconds Raymond Holt's unfinished sentence. "Some people belong in first class and some people," followed by the silence and then Carol moving back to Marcus's row. The caption was 3 words. "Watch this part." The clip had 900 shares in 11 minutes. On Reddit, a thread had appeared in the travel forum titled, "Live. Apex Atlantic Flight 112 First Class. Black kid removed from seat for business executive's wife. JFK right now." The top comment was a screenshot of Sophie's live stream. Below it, 412 replies in 20 minutes and climbing. Back in the first-class cabin, Diana Reyes had made a decision. She walked from the galley to the front of the cabin past Patrick, who reached for her arm and missed, and stood between the first row and the galley entrance where Carol was still holding the intercom handset. Carol Diana said loudly enough now that there was no pretending it was private. "I need this logged formally. I'm requesting that it be documented that I flagged the absence of ground concierge coordination before the seat reassignment happened, and that my flag was overridden." Carol turned slowly. The professional composure was intact, but there was something behind it now that was working very hard to stay invisible. "Diana, this is not the time or the place for—" "I know it isn't," Diana said. "That's why I'm saying it in front of witnesses." Patrick stepped toward her. "You are going to lose your position over this." "I know," Diana said, and she said it in a way that meant she had already calculated the cost and decided to pay it. Whitfield rose from seat 1B and walked forward again. He addressed the cabin, not loudly but clearly. "I want to say something, if I may." He paused. No one objected. "I've been in that seat for approximately 40 minutes. I watched every part of what happened. The boy had a valid ticket. He was polite. He asked reasonable questions. He was threatened with arrest. And now ground security has been called on a child who has been sitting quietly in the back of this aircraft reading a book." He looked at Carol. "That's what I observed. That's what I'll put it in writing." A woman in row 3. A raised her phone slightly higher. Raymond Holt, still standing in the aisle, turned toward Whitfield with a frustration that had been building since the moment he lost control of the narrative. "Sir, with respect, you don't know the full—" "I was here for the full picture," Whitfield said. "So was everyone else." Raymond's jaw tightened. He looked around the cabin. The phones, the faces, Sophie's live stream, Tyler's camera. He sat down. Sandra Holt had not spoken since she settled into seat 2A. She had said nothing when Carol brought her up from economy. She had said nothing when Marcus was moved. She had said nothing when the intercom announcement played. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked at the seat back in front of her. In the last 6 minutes she had not looked at her husband once. Raymond noticed this. He noticed it the way men notice the quiet that is not peace, the kind that is something being held back. He leaned toward her. "Sandra." "Don't," she said without turning her head. He didn't. Carol moved to the door panel and made a second call, this one to the gate directly. She requested ground security support. She used the language she'd been trained to use: disruptive, passenger, protocol, crew, authority, reinforcement cabin, integrity, maintenance. Diana Reyes, standing her ground near the galley entrance, looked out at the cabin. Every person in first class was looking at her, not with expectation, with something closer to recognition, the acknowledgement of someone who had done the thing they wished they had done faster. She looked at Patrick. Patrick looked at the floor. "I've worked this airline for 3 years," Diana said, and she wasn't speaking to Carol anymore, or to Patrick, or to Whitfield. She was speaking to the cabin, to the phones, to whoever was watching Sophie's stream in real time in living rooms and offices and airports across the country. "In 3 years, I have seen this happen before. Not exactly like this, but the shape of it. And every time I told myself it was being handled. I told myself someone else was responsible." She paused. "It wasn't being handled. And I was responsible. So I'm saying it now. That boy's ticket was valid. What happened to him was wrong. And I should have said that 30 minutes ago." The cabin was completely still. From 1A, the tech executive said quietly, "Thank you." No one else spoke. No one needed to. Sophie Grant's viewer count rolled past 17,000. Raymond Holt's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. It was his assistant at Mercer Logistics. The third call in 12 minutes. He had silenced the first 2. He answered this one in a low voice, leaning toward the window. "What?" "Ray, I need you to call the bank right now. Something's happening with the facility. They're saying there's been a flag on the account. I don't know what that means exactly, but the legal team is—" "That's impossible," Raymond said. "I'll call when I land." "Ray, the CFO is saying—" He ended the call. He turned the phone face down on his knee. He looked at the seat beside him. 2A, where Sandra sat with her hands still folded and her eyes still forward. He looked at the space where Marcus had been sitting. The tray table was still folded up. The armrest was exactly where Marcus had left it in the down position. Something moved across Raymond Holt's face. Not guilt, not yet, but the early shadow of something that guilt makes when it's still deciding whether to arrive. He picked up his phone again. He looked at the missed calls. He put it back down. Carol returned from the door panel. 2 Port Authority officers were on their way. The situation would be resolved. The gate would hold for another 6 minutes, but no longer. Patrick fell into step beside her. "The crew in the back says the kid is just sitting there, reading." Carol said nothing. "He didn't make a scene." Patrick continued. "He just sat down and opened his book." Carol straightened the cuff of her blazer. "He should have done that 40 minutes ago." Diana heard this. She looked at Carol for a long moment. Then she walked to the forward door of the aircraft where the jet bridge was still attached, and she pressed the intercom button for the gate agent's station. "This is cabin crew on Flight 112, she said. "I need to report an incident involving an unaccompanied minor. I'm requesting that a ground supervisor come on board before the doors are armed." Carol heard it. She turned. "Diana." "I've made the request," Diana said. She set the handset down. "It's in the system now." Carol looked at her across the galley. The 2 women stood in the narrow space between the coffee makers and the door panel, and the distance between them was something that would not be closed by anything that happened on this flight. "You just ended your career?" Carol said. Diana looked back at her steadily. "No," she said. "I don't think I did." And she was right. But she didn't know that yet. In the main cabin at row 42, seat E. Marcus Ellison was looking at his phone. The phone was ringing. 1 ring, 2. His father picked up. "I'm handling it," Noah said. "Are you still on the plane?" "Yes. Don't talk to anyone. Don't move. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. Dad." "Yeah." She said she was calling Port Authority. A pause. "I know. She's not going to get that far." Marcus looked at the back of the seat in front of him. He breathed out slowly. "Okay. I love you. I know." The call ended. Marcus put his phone in his lap. He looked at his book. He didn't open it. He just sat there in seat 42, E in the middle seat in the back of the plane with his backpack on his knees and his book in his hand, and he waited for his father to do what his father did. The man in the gray polo shirt woke up. He came out of sleep the way some people do. Gradually awareness assembling itself in pieces, eyes opening before consciousness fully arrived. He shifted in his seat, rolled his neck, and noticed the boy beside him. He looked at Marcus the way people look at someone who has been placed near them unexpectedly. An assessment that was not unfriendly, simply orienting. The boy was young. He was alone. He was holding a backpack the way you hold something when you need something to hold. "Hey," the man said quietly. "You okay?" Marcus turned. "I'm okay." "They moved you from the front?" "Yes." The man's name was Eduardo Vasquez. 52 years old, civil engineer from Houston, flying to London for a construction project consultation. He had a broad, unhurried face and the kind of steadiness that comes from spending decades managing large things that didn't go according to plan. "I heard a little bit of the commotion," he said. "Before I fell asleep. Did they give you a reason?" "They said it was a seating error." Eduardo looked at him for a moment. "Was it?" Marcus looked back at him. "No." Eduardo nodded slowly. He didn't say anything else for a moment. "Then, you call someone my dad." "Good." Eduardo settled back in his seat. He didn't go back to sleep. He folded his hands in his lap and looked at the seat back in front of him with the patient attention of a man who had decided to be present for whatever was going to happen next. On Marcus's other side, the young woman with the toddler had heard the exchange. She had been watching Marcus since he sat down. The way his hands held the backpack, the precision with which he kept his expression still. She had noticed the book. She had noticed the way he breathed. Her name was Claire Osei Bonsu. She was 31, a nurse from Brooklyn, traveling to visit her sister. Her toddler, a boy named Eli, had quieted and was now watching Marcus with the frank, uncomplicated interest of a 2-year-old who finds all strangers equally interesting. "He likes you," Claire said to Marcus, nodding at Eli. Marcus looked at the boy. Eli blinked at him with enormous dark eyes. "He has good taste," Marcus said. Claire almost smiled. She looked at Marcus. "Are you really okay?" Marcus considered the question with the honesty it deserved. "I will be," he said. In the first-class cabin, Tyler Moss had stopped uploading clips. He was now doing something more deliberate, composing a thread. He was a journalist, and he understood that a thread was different from a clip. A clip was a moment. A thread was a story with shape. He typed, "I'm on Apex Atlantic Flight 112, JFK to London. Still at the gate. In the last 45 minutes, I've watched a senior flight attendant remove a black teenager from a full-fare first-class seat and move him to row 42, to accommodate a white business executive's wife. The kid's boarding pass was valid. Full fare, no asterisk. The attendant didn't run a verification. She took the pass, handed it back, and announced an equipment change that is not logged anywhere in the system, confirmed by a junior crew member who flagged it. When the boy asked for documentation of the policy change, she threatened to call Port Authority and have him removed from the aircraft. He's 14 years old. He was traveling as an unaccompanied minor. The junior crew member who flagged the protocol violation is now being pressured by the senior purser. A passenger in first class tried to file a formal complaint and was told the captain was unavailable. Ground security has been called, apparently to handle a child reading a book in row 42. I have video of all of it. I'm a journalist. This thread will be updated as things develop." He hit post. The first reply came in 40 seconds. By the time he read it, there were 19 more. Sophie Grant in seat 5B had been narrating her live stream for 51 minutes. Her viewer count was now 22,000 and rising. She had stopped moving the camera. It rested steady on the seatback tray table aimed toward the first-class curtain. And she was speaking in a low, continuous murmur, so the flight attendant just called for ground security. Not for a fight. Not for a threat. For a kid in the back who was literally just sitting there. And there's this other crew member, the young one who's been trying to say something this whole time, and she finally said it out loud in front of everyone. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know we're going to be late. She paused. And I know that kid should not be in row 42. James Whitfield had taken out a small leather notebook, the kind with a ribbon placeholder and thick cream-colored pages, and was writing. He wrote in neat, tight longhand, recording the sequence of events with the methodical attention of someone who had spent a career in rooms where the written record mattered more than anything said aloud. He stopped writing. He looked at the window for a moment. The boy asked the right questions, he wrote. He was right on every count, and none of it helped him. Then below that, it will help him now. He closed the notebook. In row 42, Marcus's phone buzzed. Not a call. A message from his father. 3 words. Team is moving. Marcus read it. He put the phone back in his pocket. He opened his book. He found his page. The man beside him, Eduardo, glanced over and saw the title, Thinking Fast and Slow. That's a good book, Eduardo said. I know Marcus said. I've read it twice. Eduardo raised his eyebrows slightly. How old are you, 14? Eduardo looked back at the seat back in front of him. After a moment he said, My daughter is 16. She'd like you. Marcus almost smiled. It was the closest he had come in 45 minutes. He read. Or he held the book open and let the words be in front of him, while the rest of his attention lived elsewhere, in the sound of the overhead speakers and the subtle vibration of the aircraft sitting at the gate, in the knowledge that somewhere 38 floors above London, his father had stood up from a table and started making phone calls. Eduardo Vasquez did not go back to sleep. Claire Osei-Bonsu held Eli a little tighter and watched the first-class curtain. And Marcus Ellison sat in seat 42E in the middle in the back and waited. Noah Ellison stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of Conference Room A on the 38th floor of Ellison Capital Group's London offices and looked at the Thames. The river was slate gray in the late afternoon light. A tourist boat was making its way toward Tower Bridge, its wake spreading in neat chevrons. He stood there for exactly 4 seconds. Then he turned around. The conference room had been occupied 30 seconds ago by 6 lawyers, 2 analysts, and a presentation about the tax architecture of a $2.4 billion merger. Now it was empty. The lawyers had gathered their documents and left with the particular focused speed of people who understood without being told explicitly that the meeting was over and that whatever was happening on the other side of that phone call was not a thing they should be present for. Victor Salinas, CFO of Ellison Capital Group, was standing by the door. He had not left. He was 44 years old, had worked with Noah for 11 years, and had learned to recognize the specific quality of stillness Noah carried when something was not a business problem. What happened? Victor said. Noah sat down at the end of the conference table, not in his usual seat at the center. At the end, closer to the window as if he needed the distance from the center of the room. Flight 112, he said. Marcus's flight. Still at the gate. He described it. Concise, sequential, exact. The way Marcus had described it to him, and the way Noah processed everything in order without adornment. The senior purser's name. Carol Briggs. The passenger in 2B. Raymond Holt. The company on the business card Marcus had noticed. Mercer Logistics Group. The boarding pass. The equipment change with no log. The threat of Port Authority police delivered to a 14-year-old boy traveling alone. When he finished, Victor said nothing for a moment. Then, "What do you need? What is Apex Atlantic waiting on from us?" Noah asked. Victor pulled up the deal file on his tablet. He had it memorized, but he looked at it anyway because Noah looked at him when he cited numbers, and Noah noticed when the numbers were too smooth to be truly recalled. 1.2 billion bridge loan. Structured financing to cover their quarterly debt covenant. Scheduled to close Tuesday of next week. Without it, they miss the covenant, their credit rating gets downgraded, and the stock goes into freefall. They've been working toward this for 6 months. And Mercer Logistics, Victor typed. Paused. Read. $380 million revolving credit facility. We're majority stakeholder in the banking syndicate that underwrites it. They're using the full facility to fund their East Coast expansion. Warehouses, freight contracts, 3 new regional hubs. The whole growth plan runs on that line. Noah looked at the window. Get me Thomas Garrett. Thomas Garrett was the CEO of Apex Atlantic Airways. Victor had his personal cell number in a contact file maintained specifically for individuals at this level of strategic importance. He dialed. It rang twice. Noah. Thomas Garrett had the voice of a man who had expected a pleasant call and was now recalibrating. Great timing. I was just looking at the Tuesday structure. I think we can clean up the equity kicker by, Thomas Noah said. Not loudly. I need you to listen to me. Something in Noah's voice reached through the phone and recalibrated Thomas's entire posture on the other end of the line. There was a brief silence. I'm listening, Thomas said. Your flight 112. JFK to Heathrow. Currently sitting at the gate scheduled to push in approximately 12 minutes. There is a senior purser on that aircraft named Carol Briggs. In the last 45 minutes, she told my 14-year-old son, who was traveling alone as an unaccompanied minor in a full-fare first-class seat that was properly booked and properly confirmed, that if he did not surrender that seat to a business executive's wife, she would contact Port Authority police and have him removed from the aircraft and left alone in the terminal. A sound from Thomas's end. Not a word. Something involuntary, the sound a person makes when a floor gives way. My son is currently sitting in row 42. Noah continued. He was escorted there by the flight attendant who threatened him. Noah. Thomas's voice had changed completely. I'm so sorry. I will handle this immediately. I'll call operations right now. I'll have the ground manager, Thomas Noah said. Listen carefully. The command was soft. Absolute. You're not going to send the ground manager. You are going to hold that aircraft at the gate. No pushback. No doors armed. The aircraft does not move. Noah, there are 300 people on that. I know how many people are on it. A pause. My security team is leaving my London office in the next 60 seconds. They will be at JFK in 18 minutes. They're going to board that aircraft and bring my son off it. Once Marcus is safe, your airline does not fly him, and I do not want to hear the words bridge loan again until my son is on the ground. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's done. I'm calling operations right now. One more thing, Noah said. The passenger in seat 2, B. Raymond Holt. He works for Mercer Logistics Group. I know the name. Mid-tier freight company. He was the one who requested my son be moved. He spoke to my son directly before the flight attendant acted. I understand. Make sure that name is in your incident report. That's all, Thomas. Make the call. He ended the call. Victor had not moved from his position near the door. He was watching Noah with the particular attention of someone who has done this long enough to know that the next instruction would be the important one. Noah looked at him. Mercer Logistics, the credit facility. Victor understood immediately. Noah, if we call it in without notice, they can't cover it. They'll default by noon tomorrow. The board will have to take emergency action. It will reach the executive suite first. I know. Raymond Holt will be out of a job before the aircraft touches down in London. I know that too. Noah stood up. He walked back toward the window. Call it in, Victor. All of it. Cite the risk profile clause in Section 14. It's buried, but it's there. It'll hold, Victor said. I drafted it. Then use it. Victor picked up his phone. He dialed his counterpart at the banking syndicate. His voice, when the call connected, was perfectly even. Professional. Precise. This is Victor Salinas from Ellison Capital. I need to initiate an accelerated recall on the Mercer Logistics revolving facility. Full balance. Today. Yes, all of it. Cite Section 14, subsection C. Risk profile trigger. The documentation is already in the system. He paused, listening. Implement it. He ended the call. He looked at Noah's back. It's done. Noah did not respond immediately. He was looking at the river. Then, get Marcus's security team moving. I want them wheels up from the private terminal in 20 minutes. Already on it. And book the Gulf Stream from Teterboro. Marcus's dinner. The one from the Italian place he likes. Victor was typing. Done. Noah turned from the window. He picked up his own phone and called Marcus. I'm handling it, he said when Marcus answered. Are you still on the plane? Yes. Don't talk to anyone. Don't move. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. Dad. A pause. She said she was calling Port Authority. I know. The softness again. The register reserved exclusively for his son. She's not going to get that far. In the cockpit of Apex Atlantic Flight 112, Captain David Morales had just completed his pre-departure checklist and was preparing to request pushback clearance from ground control. His co-pilot, James Werner, had the weather data up and the taxi route confirmed. Everything was on schedule. They were going to make up the cargo delay. The priority channel from corporate operations lit up red. Morales looked at it. He had been flying for 22 years. He had seen the priority channel light up twice. Once during a mechanical emergency in Denver and once during a severe weather divert over the Atlantic. He reached for the handset. Flight 112. Go ahead. The voice on the other end was the Chief Operating Officer of Apex Atlantic. He sounded, Morales would later describe to his wife, like a man who was treading water. David, do not push back. Cut your engines. We need the jet bridge re-engaged right now. Morales looked at his co-pilot. His co-pilot looked back. Dispatch confirm. We have green clearance from ground control. Is there a mechanical? There is no mechanical issue, David. But if you move that aircraft, this airline may not exist by Monday morning. Park the plane and open the front door. Right now. Morales and his co-pilot looked at each other for one more second. Then Morales keyed the cabin intercom. Flight attendants? Disarm doors and cross-check. We are returning to the gate. The engines wound down. Through the floor of the aircraft, a deep vibration changed pitch and then quieted. In the first-class cabin, Raymond Holt looked up from his phone. In row 42, Marcus felt the subtle shift in the plane's energy and understood. He put his book away. He put his backpack on properly. Both straps. He waited. Priya Okonkwo, director of JFK operations for Apex Atlantic Airways, received the call from Thomas Garrett at 10:08 a.m. She listened for 90 seconds without interrupting. She was 38 years old, organized, efficient, and had spent 3 years in this role, developing a detailed understanding of what different categories of operational crisis required. This one required her to move. She was at the gate of Flight 112 in 4 minutes. 2 members of Noah Ellison's private security team were waiting at the jet bridge entrance. Tall, quiet, in dark jackets, communicating with each other in the low-frequency shorthand of people who do this professionally. They had credentials. Priya checked them. She nodded. The jet bridge was re-engaged. The door opened. Carol Briggs was at the cabin door ready to manage whatever maintenance crew or gate agent was coming. She had the expression of someone who has navigated a disruption and is now in the procedural aftermath of it. She did not expect Priya Okonkwo. Priya walked past her without stopping. "Where is the miner?" she said. Carol blinked. There was a seating issue. Where is he? Where is... Carol pointed toward the back of the plane. Priya was already walking. She found Marcus in row 42 in the middle seat, backpack on book in hand, sitting completely still. One of the security men stepped up beside Priya. Marcus looked up. He recognized the security man, had seen him at a family event in New York 8 months ago. "Hey, Marcus," the security man said quietly. "Your dad sent us." Marcus stood up. He climbed past Eduardo Vasquez, who moved without being asked, and patted Marcus's shoulder once as he passed, a small gesture unplanned that Marcus would remember for a long time. Claire Osei Bonsu caught Marcus's eye as he stepped into the aisle. She gave him a single nod, the kind that means "I saw it, and I'm glad someone came." Marcus nodded back. They walked him up the aisle, through the main cabin where faces turned, through the curtain into first class where the cabin went completely still. He passed Sophie Grant in 5B. Her phone was recording. Her viewer count was 29,000. She did not say anything. She let the camera see what was there. He passed Tyler Moss in 4A. Tyler watched him walk and thought about the thread he would finish writing when he landed. He came to the front of first class. He was walking toward the door. He would pass seat 2A. Sandra Holt was sitting there. She looked up when Marcus reached her row. Their eyes met. Sandra looked down immediately, the way people look down when they can't find anything in themselves to offer. Marcus didn't stop. He kept walking. But when he reached the cabin door, when he was 3 steps from the jet bridge and freedom, he stopped, just for a moment. He turned. Carol Briggs was standing at the galley entrance. She was watching him leave. Her face held the particular blankness of someone whose certainty has just been taken away and who has not yet figured out what replaces it. Marcus looked at her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply looked, calm, clear, without anger, without performance, for exactly 2 seconds. Then he turned and walked off the plane. The jet bridge sealed behind Marcus with a low hydraulic sound. In the first-class cabin, the silence it left was different from the silences that had come before it. This one had weight. It pressed on the seats and the overhead bins and the carefully maintained surfaces of a cabin that had just witnessed something it would not fully process until later in hotel rooms and living rooms and offices, when people sat alone and replayed what they'd seen. Priya Okonkwo turned from the cabin door and faced the aircraft. She stood at the front of the first-class section, between the galley and the first row of seats, and she looked at Carol Briggs and Patrick Lowe standing near the galley counter. She looked at Raymond Holt in seat 2B. She looked at the rest of the cabin, which was watching her with the complete attention that comes after a long wait. "I'm going to need a few minutes," she said to the cabin, "and then we'll address the flight status." She stepped closer to Carol and Patrick. Her voice dropped. Not to exclude the cabin, but because what she was about to say didn't require an audience. It was going to be brutal enough without staging. "Full names and badge numbers," she said. "Both of you. Now." Carol gave hers in the practiced tone of someone who has recited credentials many times. "Carol Ann Briggs, badge 07421. Patrick's voice was quieter. "Patrick David Lowe, badge 11836. Who initiated the seat reassignment? I assessed the situation and determined who initiated it." Priya's voice did not rise. It simply became more precise. A pause. "Mr. Holt in 2B requested accommodation for his wife," Carol said. "I evaluated the cabin and determined that a reassignment was feasible. Which protocol did you follow? Standard equipment change procedure?" "There was no equipment change logged today," Priya said. "I confirmed that before I walked down here. Nothing in the system. Not a notation, not a flag, not a preliminary entry. Nothing." Carol's jaw tightened very slightly. "There are times when..." You told a 14-year-old unaccompanied minor that if he didn't give up his seat, you would call Port Authority police and have him left alone in this terminal." Silence. "Is that accurate?" Priya asked. Another pause. Patrick looked at the floor. "I communicated the potential consequences of non-compliance with crew." "You threatened a child," Priya said. 4 words, flat and final. "You threatened him with law enforcement to compel him to surrender a seat he had paid full fare for so that a passenger who wanted it could have it. That is what happened. Do you disagree with any part of that?" Carol did not answer. Priya took her phone from her jacket pocket. She dialed. She put it on speaker. "Thomas," she said when the call connected. "I'm on the aircraft. All confirmed. No equipment change log. No ground concierge coordination. The miner's ticket was full fare and clean. The threat was verbal and explicit. I have 2 witnesses in first class and 1 crew member who flagged the protocol breach before the relocation." Thomas Garrett's voice came through the speaker. The cabin could hear it. "Effective immediately, Priya. Terminate Briggs and Lowe for gross misconduct. Ground security will escort them off the property. Notify legal and compliance and have incident documentation started. And please, personally apologize to the passengers in that cabin." "Understood." She looked at Carol. "I'll handle it." She ended the call. The moment that followed had a particular texture. Carol Briggs had been in aviation for 24 years. She had survived difficult passengers, difficult weather, difficult colleagues, and difficult management. She had accumulated seniority the way some people accumulate armor, piece by piece over time until it felt permanent. She understood in the 4 seconds after Priya ended the call that the armor was gone. "Your badge and manual," Priya said. "Right now." Carol's hands went to her jacket. They were not entirely steady. The lanyard, the clasp, the badge that said Senior Purser in embossed letters above a logo she had worn for 2 decades. She placed it on the galley counter. The gold wings pinned to her blazer. She unpinned them, and that took a moment longer than it should have because her fingers weren't cooperating in the way she needed them to. "I have seniority rights," she said. Her voice was barely above a murmur. "I'm entitled to a formal hearing before any—" "Your union representative has been briefed," Priya said. "Given the audio and video documentation in the possession of at least 2 passengers in this cabin, documentation that records you threatening an unaccompanied minor with false arrest, the union has declined to provide representation. You are on your own, Ms. Briggs." Carol stood with empty hands. Patrick had already removed his own badge, quietly without being asked, the act of a man who had calculated his options and found none. He set it beside Carol's on the counter and looked at the floor. 2 ground security officers appeared at the cabin door. They did not touch Carol or Patrick. They simply stood there, present waiting, and that was enough. Carol walked toward the door. She passed the first row of seats. She passed James Whitfield, who did not look up from the leather notebook he was writing in. She passed the empty seat 2A, where Sandra Holt sat very still with her eyes forward. She passed the curtain. She did not look back. The cabin watched her go in the same silence that had followed Marcus out the door. Heavy, without applause, without cruelty. Just the weight of people who had witnessed something and would carry it with them. Patrick followed 2 steps behind. Priya turned to the cabin. "I want to address everyone here directly," she said. She was not performing composure. She simply had it, the natural kind, earned rather than practiced. What happened on this aircraft today was wrong. It was a failure of our crew and a failure of our standards, and I am sorry that you witnessed it and sorrier still that a 14-year-old boy was made to experience it. I will be filing a full incident report, and I'll personally ensure that every passenger in this cabin receives direct follow-up from our operations team." James Whitfield looked up from his notebook. He nodded once. Not in forgiveness, not yet, but in acknowledgement. The tech executive in 1A said, "Thank you." The woman in 3A said nothing, but she lowered her phone for the first time in an hour. Diana Reyes, standing near the galley entrance where she had been standing since she made her request to ground, felt something release in her chest. She exhaled. Priya turned to her. "You flagged the protocol breach before the relocation happened?" "Yes," Diana said. "I noted the absence of a ground concierge notification, and I flagged it. It was overridden." "Your report is going to matter," Priya said. "I'll need it in writing by end of day. And Diana, thank you for not looking the other way." Diana nodded. Her eyes were bright. She did not say anything. Priya then turned toward seat 2B. Raymond Holt had been watching all of this with the expression of a man who has watched a building. He was inside begin to come apart at its joints and is still on some level waiting to be told it's a false alarm. His phone was in his hand. He had been checking it repeatedly in the last 8 minutes each time with slightly more urgency and slightly less color in his face. "Mr. Holt," Priya said. He looked up. "You requested that the crew relocate the miner in seat 2A in order to accommodate your wife. Is that accurate?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "I made a request. I didn't instruct the flight attendant to—" "Your request was the initiating event," Priya said. "The crew acted on it. Your request will be documented in the incident report. That seems—" He stopped. His phone vibrated. He looked at it. His face changed. The call was from his CEO at Mercer Logistics. He answered it with a careful, controlled voice that was doing enormous work to sound casual. "I'll call you back. Raymond." His CEO's voice, even through the phone, carried enough volume that Priya and the nearby seats could hear the urgency in it. "You need to pick up right now. Our credit facility has been called in. All of it. $380 million. We have until noon tomorrow, or we're in default. Who is Noah Ellison, and why is his company's name on the recall order?" Raymond Holt lowered the phone slowly. Sandra, still in seat 2. A had heard every word. She turned and looked at her husband for the first time since they'd boarded. The look on her face was not anger. It was something more complete than anger. It was the expression of someone watching a future she thought was stable become a past she was going to have to explain. Raymond looked at her, then at the floor, then at the seat where Marcus had been sitting before any of this began. His phone rang again. He didn't answer it. The markets opened at 9:30 on Monday morning. Apex Atlantic's ticker, a PX, had closed Friday at $41.12 per share, having spent the week in the quiet, stable range that airlines enjoy when their financing is secure and their quarterly numbers are where they need to be. By 9:32 Monday morning, it was at $33. By 9:38, it had crossed the threshold that triggered an automated circuit breaker. The SEEC halted trading on APX. The halt lasted 47 minutes, which was long enough for the financial press to run 7 different articles explaining what was happening and why, each of them noting, with varying degrees of delicacy, that the collapse of Apex Atlantic's financing arrangement with Ellison Capital Group had been precipitated not by a market shift, not by an earnings revision, not by a regulatory action, but by a flight attendant who had decided a 14-year-old boy didn't look like he belonged in a first-class seat. Thomas Garrett had not slept since Friday afternoon. He had spent the weekend on the phone, with his board, with his legal team, with the restructuring advisors he had retained on Saturday morning when it became clear that the situation was not going to resolve itself. He had called Noah Ellison's office 11 times. The calls went to a receptionist who was polite and final. When the board convened at 8 Monday morning, Thomas knew what the agenda was before he sat down. "We're short $1.2 billion, said the chairman, a man named William Fowler who had the voice of someone who had delivered bad news in boardrooms for 40 years and had stopped finding it difficult. "We missed our debt covenant at midnight Saturday. We have 3 options. Emergency bridge financing from a third party, which no one will extend to us on short notice at a reasonable rate, given why we're here restructuring under Chapter 11, or we go back to Ellison Capital. Noah has not returned our calls, Thomas said. He will, Fowler said, when he's ready. The question is what we're prepared to offer when he does. He looked around the table, and the secondary question is what we're doing with Thomas's tenure as CEO, which the board will address separately. Thomas looked at the table. You knew your employee created this situation, Fowler continued. You've now told me you received reports from that aircraft, from multiple passengers, that described exactly what was happening in real time. You did not act until Noah Ellison called you directly. I was managing the financing. You were protecting the financing, Fowler said. There's a difference. And that difference is why this conversation is happening. Thomas did not respond. He resigned before noon. In Boston, Raymond Holt had spent the weekend in a hotel room near the airport. He had not gone home. Home was a 4-bedroom in Connecticut that was mortgaged against stock options whose value had ceased to exist Saturday morning when Mercer Logistics filed emergency. Chapter 11 Proceedings. He drove to the Mercer headquarters on Monday because there was no other action available to him that felt like doing something. The leased Porsche, the executive garage, the key card. The light on the reader was red. He tried again. Red. A security guard stepped out of the booth carrying a medium-sized cardboard box. He walked to the front of the car and set it on the hood. He was a large man, and he did it without ceremony. Mr. Holt. His voice was the voice of someone who had been told what to say and was saying it. Receivership took over the building at 2 a.m. Mercer missed its primary payroll transfer Friday. Chapter 11 was filed at 6 this morning. All executive personnel are locked out pending a federal audit. Raymond stared at the box. Your desk was packed by HR. Personal items only. I need you to move your vehicle off the property. This is now a secured site. Inside the box, a framed photo of Raymond and Sandra at a company retreat in Scottsdale. A monogrammed pen set a business card holder and a small trophy from a regional sales competition in 2019. It was the kind of box that contained without meaning to the exact shape of a career. Raymond picked up his phone. He called his wealth manager. The line routed to an assistant. Mr. Holt Robert isn't available right now. We received notification of the margin calls on your portfolio Friday afternoon. Given the collapse of your Mercer position, your leveraged accounts were automatically... My house, Raymond said. A pause. Sir, the Connecticut property was collateralized against the Mercer options. The bank has initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings. Your liquid accounts are... Another pause. We're formally closing the account. I'm sorry, Mr. Holt. Goodbye. The line went dead. His phone chimed. A message from Sandra. I talked to my attorney. The divorce is being filed Wednesday. I'm at my mother's. The children are with me. Don't come here. You gave away everything we had to get me out of economy. Raymond. I still can't understand it. He set the phone on the passenger seat. He looked at the box on the hood of the car. He had spent 22 years becoming a man who could sit in first class, who could make demands of flight attendants, who could use his company's credit line like a personal instrument. He had looked at a 14-year-old boy in a seat he wanted, and had decided without a moment of uncertainty that the boy should move. He was thinking about that now, not with guilt, not yet, not quite, with a specific hollow bewilderment. The question that kept assembling itself and refusing to be answered. What did I think was going to happen? He didn't know. He picked up the box. He put it in the trunk. He pulled out of the driveway. Carol Briggs had disconnected her doorbell and turned her phone off. She had pulled the blinds in her apartment in Queens and sat in the quiet telling herself that this was survivable, that 24 years was a record. That some regional carrier somewhere would eventually stop caring about an incident that would be replaced in the news cycle by the next incident and the one after that. On Tuesday morning, she opened her laptop to check the news. The Wall Street Journal had run a long piece titled "The $14,000 Seat: How One Crew Member's Judgment Call Grounded a Financing Deal and an Airline." It did not name Marcus. He was a minor, and the publication had standards, but it named Carol Briggs 11 times. It included a time-stamped audio clip sourced from an anonymous first-class passenger of Carol's voice saying the words, "I will have no choice but to contact Port Authority Security and have you removed from this aircraft." Tyler Moss's thread had been shared 41,000 times. Sophie Grant's livestream had been viewed 8.7 million times. The most clipped segment, 12 seconds, was the moment Raymond Holt said, "Some people belong in first class and some people," and stopped. That clip alone had 4.2 million views and 11,000 comments, most of them variants of the same observation. He knew exactly what he was about to say. The FAA letter arrived on Wednesday by certified mail. It was 2 pages. The first page described the specific federal regulation that Carol had violated by threatening to weaponize law enforcement against a ticketed minor without cause. The second page contained the determination permanent revocation of her flight attendant certification. Her name would be entered into the Federal No-Hire Registry for Commercial Aviation. 24 years. Gone. She sat at her kitchen table and read the letter twice. Then she put it down and looked at the window. The morning light was coming through the blinds in thin horizontal strips. She thought about the moment she had first taken that boarding pass, the way she had looked at it, the way she had already decided before she looked. She had not thought about it that way while it was happening. She had told herself it was a judgment call, a protocol decision, a cabin management issue. The language of procedure had been so fluent inside her that she had not heard what it was covering. She heard it now. On Thursday morning, she went to the grocery store. Dark glasses, a coat despite the mild weather, head down. The cashier at the checkout line looked up and recognition moved across her face, quiet, immediate, like a key finding a lock. The cashier put both hands flat on the counter. She didn't say anything inflammatory. She didn't call out to the other customers. She just looked at Carol and said softly, "I can't help you today. I'm sorry." And she stepped back from her register. Carol looked at the groceries on the belt. She looked at the people in line behind her who had heard and who were now looking at her with the particular expression of people who know what they're seeing. She left the groceries. She left the store. She walked out into the bright morning and kept walking, and when she was half a block away, she stopped because her legs weren't going to carry her much further. She stood on the sidewalk. The city moved around her, indifferent, continuous, enormous. She had looked at a boy. She had decided who he was before he spoke. She had used every tool available to her to make him feel like a problem to be removed. And he had sat in row 42 with his book on his lap, and he had called his father, and that had been enough. That had been more than enough. Noah Ellison accepted Thomas Garrett's call on Wednesday afternoon, the 12th call. He listened to the opening, the apology, the acknowledgement, the desperation underneath it all. Then he said, "What are you offering?" The negotiation lasted 19 minutes. At the end of it, Apex Atlantic agreed to the following reinstatement of the $1.2 billion financing in exchange for an additional 3.5% equity stake, 2 permanent seats on the board of directors, and a mandatory 5-year external audit of all passenger conduct protocols across every Apex Atlantic aircraft to be overseen by an independent body with authority to recommend immediate changes. "The equity and the board seats I can do," Thomas said. "The external audit is non-negotiable," Noah said. Silence. "Okay," Thomas said. "We accept." Noah ended the call. He looked at Victor across the office. "It's done," Victor said. He had the expression of a man who has witnessed something he wants to describe accurately when he tells it later. "We just got 3.5% equity in a major airline because a flight attendant didn't look at a boarding pass." "We got it," Noah said quietly, "because my son sat in seat 42. E and kept his composure and called me instead of breaking down. Remember that part too. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then, yes, that too. 3 weeks later, on a mild Saturday evening in London, Noah Ellison and his son Marcus sat in Section E of Stamford Bridge, not in a VIP box, not behind glass, but in regular seats among the crowd, with the noise coming at them from every direction, and the smell of food and damp grass and human warmth filling the air. Marcus was wearing a Chelsea jersey and holding a hot dog in one hand and using the other to point at something happening on the far side of the pitch. He was saying something that the crowd noise swallowed before it reached Noah's ears. Noah wasn't listening anyway. He was watching Marcus, watching the way his son's face looked right now. Open, uncomplicated, fully present in the way that 14-year-olds are present when they forget to perform. The hot dog, the pointing, the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a boy who had been through something and come out the other side without being diminished by it. Victor Salinas called during the first half. Noah listened for 30 seconds. The Apex financing had closed. The Mercer Logistics asset sale had cleared bankruptcy court. Ellison Capital had acquired their entire East Coast network through a subsidiary for 14 cents on the dollar, and said, "Good." "Paperwork on my desk Monday," and hung up. Marcus looked over. "Was that about the airline thing?" "Yes." "Is it over?" "It's over." Marcus bit into his hot dog and looked back at the pitch. After a moment, he said, "I'm still going to fly first class next time." "Good. But I'm not wearing a suit for anyone." Noah looked at his son. "Don't. Not ever." Marcus looked at the pitch for a quiet moment. "Then I know. You taught me that already." Diana Reyes received an email on the Friday after the incident. She read it standing at her kitchen counter in Queens, still in the clothes she'd worn to a coffee shop that morning, her phone charger dangling off the counter because she'd been too distracted all week to plug it in properly. The email was from Priya Okonkwo. It offered her a new position, cabin services training lead, a role that had not existed at Apex Atlantic until 72 hours ago, and that had been created specifically to redesign how every crew member in the airline was trained to handle passenger interactions. The salary was 40% higher than her current rate. The position was based in New York. She would have the authority to recommend protocol changes that went all the way to the board. The last line of the email read, "You told the truth when it came with a cost." That's exactly the kind of person we need building what comes next. Diana read that line 4 times. Then she closed her laptop, walked to her window, and looked out at the street below. Taxis, pedestrians, a kid on a bike, the ordinary, unstoppable motion of a city that does not pause for the things that change inside people. She stood there for a while. She wasn't thinking about the new job exactly. She was thinking about the moment she had stepped forward on that aircraft and said the things she should have said 30 minutes earlier, and the way it had felt. Not triumphant, not righteous, just clear, just finally undeniably clear. She picked up her phone and emailed Priya back. "I accept." 2 words. Then she added a 3rd line. "Thank you for asking." Marcus Ellison never gave an interview about Flight 112. He didn't post about it. When friends at school asked, because Tyler Moss's thread had spread far enough that people connected the dots, he said it was handled and changed the subject. He didn't carry it as a story he told about himself. He carried it the way his father had taught him to carry things that happened as information, as record, as fuel. On the Sunday after the Stamford Bridge game, sitting at the desk in their London hotel room while his father worked in the adjoining room, Marcus opened the small leather notebook his father had given him when he turned 10. He turned to a new page. He wrote the date, the flight number, the airport, the names in order: Carol Briggs, Raymond Holt, Patrick Lowe, then the names on the other side: Diana Reyes, James Whitfield, Eduardo Vasquez, Claire Osei-Bonsu, Tyler Moss, Sophie Grant. He wrote, "They moved me from 2A to 42E because of what I looked like. I didn't argue. I called Dad. He did what he does. That's what happened." He looked at that for a moment. Then he wrote one more line beneath it. Not for anyone else, just for himself. In the way his father had kept his own list for 23 years, I was right, and I knew it, and I waited. He closed the notebook. He put it in his backpack. He picked up his book, still thinking fast and slow, still 3/4 finished, and found his page. He read. Outside the window, London moved through its Sunday. Gray skies, river light, the low, continuous hum of a city that had never stopped for anyone and never would. Marcus read for 40 minutes without looking up. When Noah knocked and pushed open the adjoining door to say dinner was ready, Marcus put his bookmark in, closed the book, and came to eat. He was 14 years old. He had sat in the wrong seat for 45 minutes and kept his face still and called his father. That was the whole of it, and it had been enough. True power does not announce itself. It simply moves, and it remembers everything. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of what Marcus endured and every second of what followed, then this is your moment to be like Eduardo, like James Whitfield, like Diana. Don't look away. Don't scroll past. Hit the like button right now. It costs you nothing, and it helps this story reach someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. We tell stories about dignity, about justice, and about what happens when people refuse to be made small. And share this video with someone in your life, a friend, a family member, anyone who needs to be reminded that quiet strength is the most powerful force in any room. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He just called his father and waited. Sometimes that's all it takes. Thank you for watching.